Hello, one and all, and welcome to this very special event for Raworth's Harrogate Literature Festival as part of Harrogate International Festivals. We hope wherever you are, you're staying safe and well. My name's Joe Haddow. I'm a radio producer, writer, and podcast host, and I have the pleasure of hosting our event this evening. A quick note, should I say, on our sponsor, Raworth's LLP Solicitors. You know them. They're the local Harrogate firm that everyone talks about. They've sponsored the festival since it began in 2012 and continue to do so this year. And we are, of course, very grateful to them for that. Our guest today is one of the country's finest broadcasters and the author of 6 books, the latest of which we'll be chatting about today. I have the pleasure of working with him on a weekly basis. He might not think the same. He literally can't get rid of me. Simon Mayo, hello and welcome.
Are you talking about me? I imagined you were going to cue in, Richard Osman or something. No, here I am.
You're the much-loved broadcaster who's got 6 books under his belt now. That is you.
I guess it is, really. Yes. What a strange thing. I'm still very surprised myself.
It seems now the sort of the courtesy, indeed, the first thing that one says to someone in an interview situation is, how has lockdown been for you? So
yes,
so I go with how has lockdown been for you?
Well, incredibly busy. I'm in my spare bedroom where I do 8 radio programs a week. 5 of them are live. 3 are pre-recorded. I have broadcast equipment here just outside, headphones, mixers. So on the one hand, and Mark Kermode and I did a TV show for BBC 4. So never been busier. So on the one hand, that's fine. On the other hand, it's terrible. And so we've got a couple of big hospitals just up the road. We know what's going on there. My mother-in-law had a stroke halfway through lockdown, which, as you can imagine, made it incredibly difficult. So, can't visit, then find a nursing home, can't look round, all those kind of. So, many people watching will have their own horror stories. So, on the one hand, I'm working, which is, a blessing, and I'm very pleased and very fortunate. But on the other hand, the circumstances out there are pretty crap. So I'm not, hence we're doing this rather than actually being in a proper festival with proper people, and signing books and saying hi to people and eating stale crisps backstage, and drinking nice beer,
Very nice beer indeed, especially in Harrogate. Is it strange for you to have, you've published an adult book before, you've published 4 children's books, YA books. So is it strange to have this one out in this time and not be able to go and do those events?
You kind of, because writing such a solitary experience, I particularly look forward to going out and selling them and talking to people and going into halls and then meeting folk afterwards and signing books. And then they ask you great questions, and it's, for all the, you think, I should look forward to plugging this one, I look forward to going out there and meeting people. And that's, and I do, and I enjoy standing up and reading bits from the book and all that. So it's very frustrating. I mean, fortunately, my book came out when the bookshops were open, so at least people could actually go into a bookshop and buy it. But the absence of festivals is rotten. I can't see any way it's going to happen in the near future. Lots of strangers in a room and then lining up and signing books for a lot of strangers, even though they're very lovely people. I can't, I don't think it's looking good. I think I was reading Ian Rankin talking about festivals. I think we'll be doing this for this year and probably next year.
Yeah.
And then we'll see what happens.
But I have spoken to quite a few authors and said, is the perfect time to be able to get into a book, especially a book like Knife Edge, your latest, which is a complete page turner, and you can lose yourself in it. And actually, I think there's something in that at the moment. People are turning to books to get their escapism, really, to turn away from the news and what's outside. So in some ways, do you think it's a good thing that the publishing industry is managing to keep going and that books are still sort of coming out?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think in tough times, books that are a distraction are terrific. I mean, any good book is something fantastic to disappear into. I mean, I think, publishing has got, it's got its own issues. All I can do is to sit here in this room and tap away, and hopefully something comes out at the end, and I think my main issue as regards COVID is, how do you write crowd scenes now? How do you, the bar, the station, the football match, the school gate, the school, a lot of authors I've spoken to are setting their book, a few years back. Nick Hornby's book is a few years ago. It's set around the Brexit period. Some people are throwing it forward. And it's really difficult. If you're reading a novel, do you want it to reflect your life as it is now? Do you want it to have any kind of reference to the fact that we have to be distant from so many people? Because then by the time the book comes out, who knows what the situation is going to be like? So I find that's the most difficult. So I'm trying and failing, but I'm trying to write a new book at the moment. And I think I'm just going to have to set it 2 years in the future. I mean, I think that's when things have been sorted, So I think that's the main kind of worry I have.
Well, it's funny how you mentioned, how quickly the previously normal can feel so strange in the course of a few months. I'm thinking not only of, the cover of the book, for example, which in itself, you look at it now and kind of go, ooh, they shouldn't be next to each other. But, from a crowded London Euston train station at the beginning of this novel, you read it, and although it doesn't affect any enjoyment of the book, there is that sort of like, oh, right, yeah, that wouldn't happen.
Oh, sure. Oh, everything. I mean, but it's like you see a photograph, you see a drama, you see a new movie, all of which, of course, were filmed before lockdown. It'll be a while before any of that other stuff comes through. And you go, I wouldn't get too close. Wow, how come they're hugging? What are they doing in a bar so close to each other? And I do think that's, I do think there is part of me thinks there's a new normal and we're going to have to get used to it. And then I walk down the road here, pub closing time now, 10 o'clock, and everyone's just milling around the way they always used to. So who knows? As far as writing is concerned, I'm just going to carry on setting books either in the future or the past rather than the present, because the present is too uncomfortable.
I haven't spoken to a single author in the past 6 months who said that they want to write a sort of COVID book, not about the pandemic, but set in this time. I don't know anyone who wants to do it. It's almost as if, we just don't think audiences want it, but also we don't even want to, think about this year and have it.
Well, and that's true. I should be talking about Knife Edge, not my next book, which won't come out for a couple of years. But my problem with the new book is that it starts off. No, I'm not even going to say it. It basically, no, I can't even say that. Yeah, because it might go. No, anyway, all I'm saying is I have got an issue because I do have to address the current situation in the book. And given how quickly things are changing, that's quite tricky. But I do have to do it. So I will do it. And I look forward to coming to Harrogate in a couple of years' time in person to read out extracts from the next book.
Very much so. Well, let's talk about Knife Edge, though, because obviously, this new book is...
That's a safer thing to do.
I think it's a safer thing because, it exists and it can't be changed now. So for those that haven't read it yet, can you just set up this plot, tell us about Famie, your central character, and the story that she goes through?
Can I just say, before I do that, can you hold the cover up again?
Yes, I can.
Right. So, and then and a bit higher. So people can see it says, you never know where danger will come from, to which so many people have said, well, presumably it's the guy in orange. So it's the guy in the rucksack. Come on, I think that's the obvious thing. Yeah, it's him. Yeah. So Fahmy, we at the beginning of the book, there are 7 murders on the first page. And we join Fahmy Madden, who's a journalist. She works for one of the big London news agencies, think Reuters or Bloomberg, one of those. And she's going to work, and she's doing the morning shift, so she's there at 7 in the morning. And her job is referred to as slot, which means she's like the news editor of the UK desk. The stories come in, she tastes them, verifies them, and then puts them out on the wires. That's her job, to put the stamp of approval of the news agency on them. And then as the morning goes through, it's quite clear there's been an incident as these 7 separate stabbings come in, 7 murders in different parts of London, all in one rush hour, all in the space of half an hour. And then when the pictures come in of the victims, she realizes that she actually knows who they are. And not only that they sit next to her at the news agency, because they are all reporters in the investigations unit, and they've all been killed in 1.5 hour. So she quits her job. She's fed up with the reorganization and management and everything, and cuts. And also now she's terrified, as is half of London. And she decides to go to all 7 funerals, and they're all her colleagues, obviously. And at the end of the 7th funeral, she gets back to her car, and there is a note underneath the windscreen wiper of her car, and it's a typewritten note. It's actually written with an old-fashioned typewriter, so indented into the paper. And all it says on the sheet is, "You don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows." And she's slightly too young to know instantly that that's a Bob Dylan lyric, but she obviously finds that out with the assistance of Dr. Google. But that's the start of the messages, and she's getting strange messages as though it's the 1930s crime drama. So some come through letters, some come through the personal ads in the Daily Telegraph, and so she's trying to work out, is she being targeted? Why is this person sending a message? Who is this person, and who killed my colleagues? So that's sort of the opening couple of chapters, and off we go.
And off we do go.
Off we go.
You can't really put it down after that, Simon, if I'm honest. It's just, it just keeps you wanting to know more. The chapters themselves are very, they're sort of short, they're stabby, for want of a better word. And I wondered if that was intentional from the off, or whether that was something that, you did in the edit.
No, I wrote in very short chapters. I can't remember which book it was, but I read a couple of books last year which were divided in this way, and it makes it so devourable, because I'll just do the next chapter. I'm feeling a bit tired. Okay, look, 1.5 pages or 2 pages. The shortest chapter is 1 paragraph. And I think the longest might be 4 or 5 pages. It just naturally fell into a number of different scenes. And so once I decided to write it in that way, I think it was also a reaction to Mad Blood Stirring, which was my last book. I wrote it in a kind of a copy of Romeo and Juliet. So it was divided into 5 acts and then a number of scenes, and those scenes were quite long. So I think I was wanting to get away from that and just keep it short, keep it, really, really as fast as possible. So if you can't put it down, and if it goes at a breakneck speed, then that's as intended.
Good. Well, I couldn't. And it put me in mind of a book that was published, I think, about 18 months ago, called My Sister the Serial Killer. It's by Owen K. Braithwaite. And it's same thing, same device of just hitting you with those short chapters. And I think you're right. I think you end up reading more over a shorter time, because you're just sort of like, oh, I can do this.
I think it's instead of sitting down to a big meal, you can, you end up eating more, because you're picking at things. I'll have some of that.
The
tapas style is what it is. So, but still equally fulfilling. I like to think.
A tapas novel. That's a new.
I don't think I like that. Let's move away from that.
You mentioned Mad Blood Stirring, which was your previous novel, and as I remember, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you got the inspiration for that from a small news cutting or a story that you stumbled across, and there wasn't much information, so you went and you did your research.
Yeah.
But
Mad Blood, I stumbled into writing. I stumbled into writing the Itch books. And I was writing Blame, which was the YA book, and I was looking for which is a prison drama basically, and I needed a prison in the southwest of England, and the only one I could think of was Dartmoor, and it is pretty much the only one apart from in Exeter. And I started doing some research on Dartmoor, and then I came across all the interesting history of Dartmoor, and I thought, I don't want to. I can use that somewhere else, and I set it somewhere else. But then I went back to reading about Dartmoor, which has this astonishing history, which I still believe to be genuinely astonishing and thrilling. So I kind of stumbled into that, and then the more I read, the more I thought I need to write this story. And when I discovered that there was a production of Romeo and Juliet, the first black-produced Romeo and Juliet in Britain in 1814, I thought, well, this feels topical, So it went like a steam train from there.
And so how did you stumble upon the idea for Knife Edge then?
Well, I think it was a number of things all happening together. One was a simple typo. And I was writing, and I can't remember why, but I was writing in an email, CNN. I was writing about the cable news network. But instead of writing CNN, I was distracted, and I wrote, it came out on the page as CNX. And I looked at, and they were the only letters on the page. And I thought, something about CNX. I like that. That feels good. And then the next phrase that came to mind was, when television goes bad. And I thought, okay, I don't know what the story is, but I quite like that. Maybe I could set it at CNN and something's gone terribly bad. I don't know what's going bad, but that sounds good. Anyway, so it span out from there. And then instead of it being in America, it's in the UK. And then instead of it being a television station, I thought it would have more international appeal if it was set in a news agency. So that was one thing. And then another was a conversation I had with Gordon Carrera, the BBC security correspondent. And he'd been talking about, I was asking him about spying, and because I'd been reading a great book about Second World War spying by Amanda Scott called A Treachery. It's called, is it Treachery of Spies? And something like that. Anyway,
yeah, I think so, yeah.
And I thought that was terrific. Anyway, but Gordon Carrera was talking about how you hear a lot about high-tech espionage, but the real danger and the people who terrify the security services are the people who are off-grid. Anyway, to cut a long story short, so the bad folk in this are completely off-grid. They have no websites, they have no computers, they have no mobile phones, and they're up to no good. And I thought that felt like an old-fashioned traditional thriller with the extra spin of the history of radicalized Islam, which we've had in the last few years. Also, it takes place in the backdrop of Britain in 2020, so it's a post-Brexit novel. And one of the bad guys explicitly says in their conversations that Britain is a hollowed-out country, and all we need to do is give it one more push, which is a very kind of Leninite approach. So although it's so on one hand, it follows a traditional structure, hopefully it feels very contemporary as well.
Yeah, it does. Very much so. I wondered if you'd thought before setting it in a news room, for want of a better word, whether you mentioned it might have been a TV show. I wondered whether you'd ever thought it would be like a radio station, like 5 Live, for example.
Yeah.
On the air news now coming through.
Yeah, I mean,
Too close to
I
home, maybe.
yes, I think so. I mean, the only thing I'd say about that is, having worked at Five Live for a number of years, and I still do the movie show for Five Live, obviously, but I'm not in their newsroom. I'm not at the heart of the news operation. But I was there for a number of years when I did the afternoon show. So that whole mindset of breaking news, substantiating a news story, bitching between journalists, foul-mouthed journalists, of which Femi, I'm afraid to say, is one.
They all are in this book.
Well, Femi leads the way. My mother now has a copy of the book, and I have had to say, look, Mum, journalists swear a lot. Which actually, when I gave her a copy of Mad Blood Stirring, I said, look, how do you think 19th century sailors spoke about each other? So it's quite fruity. Anyway, so there is. I think you can probably tell at times that I know what a newsroom is like, and I did go over to Reuters and I did look at how, because a news agency is a different operation to radio and television. So I think there is that awareness of breaking news. There's an awareness about the way journalists work. I don't consider myself a journalist, but I've seen them work close up. And in fact, my main character is sort of inspired by a woman who I did work with on my show, called Nita Mann, who sadly is no longer with us anymore. But she was arch and sarcastic and brilliant, and she didn't really fit in, and she swore a lot. Yeah, and so So I think Femi it's kind of loosely based on her. So I think it's certainly rooted in a traditional newsroom, but it was never going to be set in a radio newsroom, and we soon moved away from the television as well.
Yeah, because you were on air for 9/11, I think, weren't you? You were broadcasting live, and so when you did have the afternoon show there were these times when things were coming in, and you're just to adapt.
Yeah,
I imagine you put a bit of that into this.
Yeah. When one big story takes over, a newsroom becomes sort of convulsed by the particular story, and thrilled also, because the adrenaline is running. Yes, and the 9/11 experience was one of I was told when Bob Shannon, who was the boss at Five Live at the time, said, come and do this show. He said that there'll be bad news that you have to report. Bad things will happen during your program. Obviously, no one imagined what was coming down the tracks. I'd only been doing the job a few months, and there were a few folk in the newsroom who thought, "What is this DJ? Why is he here?" Something I was thinking as well, actually. But at 1:45 in the afternoon on September the 11th, when the first plane struck, we were doing a piece of money news, and the studios have all the TV monitors tuned to the different news stations. So you quickly realise, as they all sort of cut to the same thing, that there's something going on, and you say that one of the towers is burning, and then during the news at 2:00, I saw the plane hit the second tower. And then you think, okay, so the whole program we've lost everything, so we're going to start again. And so basically the whole newsroom, and it's a big operation, started to work for one show, which then flipped when I finished, and then everyone works for the next show, because this story was obviously so big. And as far as, so that experience, I think, is in the first few chapters of this book. In fact, there is one line when I hope this doesn't sound inappropriate, but when towards the end of the 9/11 show, I looked through the glass, and the Director General and the head of radio and the head of Five Live, they were all standing there looking through the glass, gawping at the screens, trying to work out what to do. And they said afterwards, we were trying to think, do we evacuate? Should we be evacuating the building? Are we under threat? Nobody knew anything at the time. And then Jenny Bramsky, who was the head of radio, came up to me after the last as I remember it, the last 30 seconds, I was a bit all over the place, and it was a bit shambolic. And I and I expressed my annoyance at that, and it was a bit all over the place. And she said, "Simon, it was a tour de force." So, and it's a line that Fame's boss says to her after the way she's handled the story of what happens in the opening pages, just because it felt like it was nice to hear. So I thought, well, maybe that's the kind of thing that a boss would say after a few hours. So that's the only kind of direct tie-in, I think.
I mean, I've mentioned how much of a page turner it is. On the surface, it is very much a thriller, a story that you get engrossed with. I just wondered if there was, I mean, you already touched on the Brexit thing a tiny bit, but like, is there a sort of bigger overarching theme that you're not necessarily smacking us around the face with, but a theme about journalism, about the state of journalism in our current sort of...
Other than that, I have a very high opinion and high regard for journalists and journalism. There isn't. It is. I don't think it's about anything other than hopefully a very exciting, believable, terrifying at times story. I always think that the scary ones are the ones that you think, well, this could happen.
Yeah.
You know, flights of fancy are fine, you know, and fantasy is fine. But the stories that are the most disturbing are the ones that I think, wow, this feels like the news. You know, this feels like it is something that could be happening if I go outside. I'm going to look at the world in a different way. So if it has anything to say about journalism, all it is my very high regard for the people who do it, because I sat opposite them and talked to them and interviewed them when I was doing the afternoon show on 5 Live.
There's something about London as a setting for crime thrillers, and in fact, I was talking to some authors a couple of weeks ago who specifically set their books in Glasgow. There's an author called Joseph Knox who's all about Manchester, but cities themselves are very much the sort of the settings, ripe settings for stories like this. Did it have to be London for you, as in terms of, I suppose, you know, that's the centre of the news world, but also as a city that you just know better than others?
I think it did have to be based to start with in London, because you're right, it's where the big news agencies are, and of course there are other offices, and there are TV stations and radios across the country, but certainly it's my town. I'm a Londoner. It's the city that I know the best. But I should say, you know, half of it is in London, and then the other half isn't. So it doesn't just stay in London, because the journey takes them north. And so we start here because I think it is the news hub of the UK. My 5 Live colleagues in Salford might disagree, but you know, the big news agencies, their big offices are here. When I went to look around Reuters, it's here. It's in London. So London is a unique city. It's an international city, and it matters. So it was going to be the only place to start, but we don't stay in London, because I can sense some disgruntlement from people going, metropolitan southern elite nonsense. Come north anyway. So we do.
Come north, and you do.
Yeah, a bit.
Because of your podcast that you do, Books of the Year, and your radio shows, you know a lot of authors. You've got a lot of writer friends, and I just wondered if there was this sort of authorly club that you were a member of, that you sort of bounce ideas back and forth. Does it not really work like that?
No, really. Well, that it did. You know, it's one of the great things about these festivals, and which I miss very much, is those few moments where you might have half an hour in the green room with random author, anyone, someone who's just on at the same time as you, and you get a chance to say, well, what are you working on? What are you doing? What are the crowds like? You know, what do you know? And I like that thing you did, and chances are I'll have interviewed them, you know, somewhere before. So I really miss the fact that I get to interview authors, but we never, ever meet. You know, no, none. I'm not. I
Sort of
don't.
upper club or something.
Yeah, no. I would love to. I mean, see, the thing is, because I spent all my career doing radio, that and I've only been writing for 12 years, so I'm the radio presenter who writes, which is I still find quite annoying. And at the beginning of the year, I did think I should probably do less radio and more writing, but then everything changed, and the writing and the television and the movies and all that felt too unpredictable, and the radio has been very nimble, and hence I'm doing eight shows in my prison here, so it hasn't changed.
I've got two questions on 2 points you just raised there. One, going back to when you started writing, which was just when you were just a tiny bit younger. Do you think that because you were a little bit older and because you'd had a whole other career and life experience and stuff, that it actually helped you in terms of being able to come up with these stories and the way that you have written your books?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that, because I've done 6 books, but I've only done 6 books, and I'm very old, and I wish I had another 20 books, under my belt. But I just started writing as a product of where I was at the time, which was I left 5 Live, I joined Radio 2. That was one thing. And at 5 Live, I'd spent a lot of time talking to authors. We did 2 authors a week for many years. Second thing was my youngest son was only interested in science, and I wanted to try and find a book for him. He was 10 at the time. And the third thing was the iPad, the thing I am speaking to you on at the moment. And I got the first iPad on the first day because I'm an Apple nut. And one of the first apps that I got was a periodic table, like an interactive spinning, brilliant creation, periodic table. And when I was reading this app, which cost $14.95, which was a lot of money to pay for an app, I haven't got over that. It used the phrase element hunter to describe someone who collects the periodic table. And I thought, if I was a kid, I'd love to be an element hunter. How exciting. And I was convinced that someone else would have done this. And you check, and no one had. So it was all those things coming together that made me think, well, the periodic table is such an iconic shape. It's the same around the world. It doesn't need to be translated. You know what that shape is. And it doesn't matter whether you live in Saudi or Solihull. There you go. It's still hydrogen, then helium, and then beryllium, and then boron. It's still exactly the same shape. Let's go with that, So, and then I wrote in a frenzy, really, and I without an agent, without a publisher, nothing. I wrote the whole book, and I wrote it for my son, who used to sleep through that wall, and I printed it. I went to W.H. Smith. I bought an extra lot of A4 paper. I printed it off on on our printer, which sort of gave up the ghost. And I handed him this big wedge of papers, and he went upstairs and he read it, and he liked it. And so then I thought, well, maybe I can do something with it, So, like I said, I kind of stumbled into that.
Has he continued to be one of your first readers?
Yes, although I have to say, with Knife Edge, he wasn't one of the first. He did have a copy, but for some reason it took him a long time to actually get round to even beginning, So, but he has other. When he's old, he's a student. He's got sleep and friends and the internet and social media and all that.
Oh, it's a busy old life, isn't it, for them students?
Yeah.
I
don't know where he got it from.
Speaking of which, though, you had it commissioned in Australia for an ABC series, and I believe it's the BBC have now got it, haven't they? And we might be seeing it on our screens sometime soon.
Yeah. So these things, it's torturous the amount of time it takes. See, radio people, you're thinking, I've got an idea. Can I do it tomorrow? And then you've done it tomorrow, then you move on and do something else. Everything takes so long. Anyway, yes, the BBC turned down Itch. It's then cutting 10 years into one paragraph. ABC Australia liked it. It's been reimagined. Instead of it now being set in Cornwall, it was very much a Cornish mining story. Instead of it being set in Cornwall, it's now set in Albany in Western Australia, which kind of works because it has a very similar mining, it has a mining history as well. So it's still a story about mining. It's still a story about a kid who's an element hunter, who's trying to work out what this incredible rock, which appears to be very dangerously radioactive, what it is and where it's come from. So it's still that story. Nathaniel Flowerdew, his science teacher, is still the bad guy, and they go off in this adventure. It's just set in Australia as opposed to Cornwall. So yes, and the BBC have now bought it, and it's going to be on our screens next month, I think. I mean, it's still a little bit, trying to get any information out of the BBC is impossible, but it'll be November time, I think. And hopefully, for 10 years, it's still there. It's still recommended by schools. I still get letters about it, and which is thrilling. So we've got 10 years of school kids, hopefully, who will find Itch on the television and enjoy it. They're about to start filming the second series actually in Albany, because that kind of remote part of southwestern Australia is opening up much quicker. Right. So they start filming in the next few weeks.
Sadly, you won't be able to get over there this time.
I know. That's a drag. No, it was fantastic. Yeah, we flew over and I met the cast and that was terrific. I mean, very strange. On the first day, I sat with headphones on watching Itch and his sister Chloe, which was a scene I'd written in a Cornish kitchen, and they were sitting on the end of a pier, a jetty, looking out into this beautiful sea in Australia. But the dialogue was very similar to what I'd written, so that was weird. Never happened before, but I'm glad I went out. But no, I won't be going this time.
No. Please tell me you had a chair that said writer on it.
Sadly, I'm afraid
Oh.
TV budgets didn't stretch to that. Maybe if I'd asked. I am in one of the episodes.
Oh, yeah.
There's a cafe scene, and I'm a crazy writer, typing away at my laptop, just as the camera pans across.
Fantastic. Yeah. Oh, you did a Michael Bond, who is in the very early scene of Paddington.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was their suggestion. They said, "Do you want to be in it?" And I said, "Yeah, I've flown all this way."
Yeah.
So yeah, that was fun. That was fun. It's still frustrating that it wasn't set in Cornwall, but they've done a fantastic job. The cast are great, and Albany looks terrific.
Just got a few more questions before we wrap up, and it's more about your writing, your process, and indeed sort of looking to the future. And you already mentioned about the room you're in now and doing a million radio shows and podcasts and things. So one of my questions was, when do you write?
Yeah.
Because I know what it's like for radio shows, especially daily radio shows, to be all consuming. And, sometimes you get to the end of a day and you think, well, that's me done. I can't possibly now be creative. So what's your how do you deal with that? And what's your writing time like usually?
Basically, everything is a little bit of a shambles. So there is very little organisation that goes into this. When it worked at its best was when I was at Radio 2, because the show started at 5. I could write in my head. I wrote in the morning, and then I went to work. That always got broken up by screenings or interviews or something. But that's what I did. Since then, it's been a whole lot more messy. So Knife Edge was done whenever I could grab an extra week or 2 weeks, or working late into the night, or just snatching time wherever I could find it. And the same is true of this new book. I mean, I was hoping, I had 3 weeks off in the summer, I was hoping to make some dent in it, but I have failed to do so. So there is so much time that the radio takes that there is no doubt that the writing is slowing down. But the radio is the work, the radio is the regular work. And writing is this sort of, I would like to stop doing as much radio and do more writing, but that's quite difficult. to to arrange. So I wish I was more organised, and I wish So although my Scala show is 10 till 1, then there's the movie show that I'm doing. Then there's the books podcast. Then there's a Greatest Hits radio show on Sundays. So hey, it's all my fault. But it's slightly too chaotic, Joe. That's the answer. I wish I could pretend that I was supremely organised. I love/hate authors that say, I write from January till June. I start on the 3rd and I finish on the 19th. And then I stop. And then we summer in Barbados. That would be so great. I want to do that. In 2 years' time, I want to be able to say, well, I've decided I'm going to write for 6 months and then I'm going to go to Croydon. That's what I'm going to do.
More so than the January to Juners, I think I hate the ones who say, actually, I just go to my beautiful villa in insert wonderful country and just write for 4 months and then that's me done. I think those are the real
yes.
I'm really
it's only jealousy. I would love to be able to do that, but in the meantime, we just keep on keeping on.
Because of all of the shows that you do, and you're a big reader anyway, but with the book shows you do, you have to sort of read authors' books. So do you find you're able to do that when you're writing? Because I know a lot of authors say that actually if they're in writing mode, they'll read non-fiction, for example, or they won't read the genre that they're writing in, but you don't necessarily have that luxury all the time, do you?
No, I think I credit him at the end of Knife Edge, but I remember, I think it varies from book to book, but I was definitely reading a lot of Lee Child when I wrote Knife Edge, and I like the way Lee writes in short, succinct sentences and paragraphs. I like the rhythm that he gets to his writing. And there's one particular book which he wrote where there is a character who is just referred to as the American because we're not supposed to know who it is, and then it's revealed who the American is. And there's a character in Knife Edge who's referred to as the student, and we don't know who the student is until we need to. So I think maybe there's that's why I acknowledged him in the book. And the great thing was on my Books of the Year podcast, he interviewed me because he said a year ago he said, oh, I should interview you for this. You've interviewed me enough. So and he did, and he was in Wyoming and I was here, and Lee Child interviewed me. It was crazy. It was crazy, but he liked it. Plus, also he grew up in Coventry, so without giving too much away, he was very interested to know about Coventry and why I had decided to put Coventry in the story. See, that's how far north we get.
Yeah. See, north.
Which is obviously the south as far as Harrogate is
concerned. Yeah. My final question is about what's next for you, because you've written children's books, YA, historical fiction, and now a sort of contemporary thriller. So I wondered, is there another genre that you're
No, don't even finish that sentence. I would maintain that all my books are thrillers. Okay. The Itch books are certainly thrillers. They happen to be aimed at a younger audience, so they go into a different part of the bookshop. Blame was a YA book, but it's a thriller, but it's still in a different part of the bookshop. Mad Blood Stirring was slightly different. It's historical fiction. So that maybe is on its own. So, but Knife Edge is another thriller, So and the book that I'm trying to write is another thriller, and I think I'm going to stay in this. I want to stay in this genre. So I think this is what I'm going to do, and I'm happy doing it. I think this is the kind of thing that I like reading. So this is the thing I enjoy writing. So unless a Mad Blood Stirring sequel is asked for at some stage in the future, who knows? I'll stick to. Who knows? I can't say. I'll stick to this. And the working title of my next book is. Can I even say what it is? No.
Obviously, we want you to. I don't know whether you're allowed to or not.
Okay. Well, the working title at the moment is Noise.
Okay.
I like a one-word title.
Yeah.
So my editor is now going to go absolutely crazy. So chances of it actually being called Noise by the time we talk, it'll be called something utterly different. By the time we get to do it. Anyway, so that's what it is. When I type a document, that's what it says at the top.
Very good.
It's an exclusive to Harrogate. That's what it is.
There, you heard it here first, folks, virtually.
Yes. Thank you.
The Harrogate Festival. Knife Edge by Simon Mayo is out now. It's published by Doubleday, and I thoroughly suggest you get yourself a copy if you haven't already.
Yeah, so do I.
And Simon thinks you should get a copy as well if you haven't.
Yeah, and what's going to happen now is I'm going to go and I'll sit out the back by the table, and I'll sign as many books. Anybody who wants a book, I'll be there as long as you could bring me a glass of wine or something like that. I'll stay and sign for as long as people want to talk.
Maybe a sort of a queue of just Zoom calls, maybe, like 35 seconds each and passing.
Yeah,
as you
there's got to be a version of that, but maybe next year.
Always a pleasure, Simon. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks very much for listening, if indeed you have been.